Hello? It's um it's a really rainy afternoon. Well, actually, the weather kind of won't make up its mind. It's really overcast, and then it's really bright and sunny, and then it's really overcast, and it's actually been raining here for a while today. So I've got my studio all closed up as far as all the windows, and I've got all the lights on. So that our light will stay consistent while we work today. So hopefully that's the smart decision. Makes me look like I'm a little bit in the dark, but I'm not nearly as dark as it looks there. Anyway, if you are there and watching and can type something in the chat to let me know you're there and everything's working good, I need to know if the sound is good, etc. And hi, Jackie. And yes, if you let me know where you're watching from, that would be awesome too. And I guess what I want to just do is say that we're going to jump pretty much straight into this today. I had sent out a message via my Facebook, I think, that if you wanted the tracer for today's drawing and painting, I could send that to you. And so uh, didn't if you didn't see that message and you want the tracer, I might still be able to get it to you. Otherwise, draw fast. um, so hi, yes, it's I got South Florida, California, somewhere else, I'm not sure, but it looks like the signal's all good and the sound is good, so that's great to know. Um, okay, so let's just go down to my tabletop here, and again, I have just a smidgen of lag between when my preview screen updates. Let's try this one. Uh, when I hit the button and when my preview screen updates is just a couple of seconds. So yeah, that's what I wanted to see. Okay. Wow, Saudi Arabia, that is so awesome. Thanks for watching from all the way over there. Um, okay, so I have got my reference photo up on the screen, and I did put the link out there for that I shared it from my Google Drive, so that hopefully you were able to find the link for that in the description to this live stream, so you could go click there and go there and download the reference photo. Now I already have my drawing drawn out onto my watercolor paper, because we could spend an awful lot of time working just on that, but we're gonna skip that part and go straight to the painting. Now, if you want, oh shoot, I don't know where I put my my little drawing that was the value study. I'll have to go and see if I can grab that real quick. But what I did was I made, okay, here, let's start at the beginning. I had gone to the store and bought all these, and some of this I did last year, or the year before. I bought all these fake pumpkins, which I also meant to grab and bring in here. They're still in my other room. But anyway, I have all these props, and I was creating a little setup with the fake pumpkins and the fake flowers and stuff, and I have this really cool big thing of grasses, dried grasses, that's all bundled together and stands up there. And so I put all these things out there, and I was arranging them different ways and turning the lights on and turning them off and opening the blinds, trying to experiment with that and get a good picture that I liked for reference for today's painting. Or just for fall paintings in general, because I really like to paint fall stuff. But I couldn't get one that I liked good. So I got this one I got this picture that was really close from taking photographs. This stuff it's heaped up so funny, and I have clamps in the background holding the flower stems just exactly so that they'll hold the blossom in the right direction. But anyway, I couldn't get it quite right, so I took one of my photographs and I put it in this program that I have that is very similar to Photoshop. It's not Photoshop, but it's real similar. And it's, what is it called? Paint Shop Pro. It's by Corel. Anyways, I took that and I photoshopped my photograph, and I airbrushed out some of the background and stuff, and I got myself a piece of digital artwork that I like. Then I took this digital artwork that I printed out and I made a drawing of it, which I posted that somewhere. I can't even remember where, but I made an actual drawing of it with shading and all that kind of stuff so you could see, and it was to serve the purpose of a value study. And then I made this tracing of it, and this is what I put out there that I could send you if you wanted it, because I can use this to transfer the design over onto my watercolor paper. Or if you happen to be painting on canvas or on a piece of wood or cardboard or whatever you're painting on, you can transfer the drawing over and over repeatedly to multiple things if you want. The only thing is, you have to print it out in the size that you want, because like I emailed this out to a few people, and if you just print just the normal way, it would come out on your 8.5 by 11 piece of paper just like this. But if you've got a printer that'll print on larger paper, you can adjust the size, or I guess you could always go to the Office Max or Kinko's if they're still around, or someplace like that, and get your printout whatever size you want it, so that you then trace that onto your paper, and then we're good to go. So I am going to just stack my reference photo here on my table, and as much as possible I will keep the that's not going to work. As much as possible I will keep the reference photo up on the screen there. It's going to just have to be up there for the time being. Here's a couple of other, just to show you what I'm talking about. I made all these bazillions of efforts at coming up with a good setup. Maybe I need to get that reference out of the screen there for a second, just so you can see. But I just have all of these really nice dried florals and silk or plastic flowers that I kind of arranged with some of the different stuff I have sitting around, and made a pretty setup. And that's an easy thing to do. Anyone can do that. Okay, now I think I'm pretty much ready to start painting. If you're not, if you don't have a drawing on your watercolor paper, you can go ahead and start drawing and then catch up, because we're going to approach this from a standpoint of, we're going to start blocking in paint color and do this in multiple layers. It's going to be layers upon layers upon layers, actually, and some glazing and all that type of thing to get to get the end result painting that we want. So we're going to be at this for a little while, and you'll have no difficulty if you want to get something drawn on there and then catch up to the painting. I have mostly flat angle brushes. That's what I prefer to paint with. And today I'm going to be using this one that is a round, and it's size 6, I think that says there, size 6. But whatever, if you've got a good round brush, it doesn't really matter what size it is. If it'll hold its tip, you can use, like I've got, where do I have them? That's not the right one. Okay, this one is a size 10, but I have size 14s and larger, and as long as the tip is a good tip and it'll hold its point, like I got that wet. Okay, now see, that's holding a really nice point there. So I can get really nice fine details with this larger brush. So if you don't have a tiny one, it's not that big a deal. As long as you've got a good quality brush, that you can get it to hold its tip on. And I personally don't like rigger brushes, those long skinny ones. I like to be too much in control, I guess is the thing. So I don't like those brushes, but that's okay. A lot of people like them. Okay, one last thing. I've got my cup of hot apple cider with some cinnamon in it, because again, it was rainy. It's not cold here at all, but it was rainy, so I'm pretending. And it is fall, so I'm having my fall drinks, apple cider with a lot of cinnamon in it. So now, let's start painting. I'm going to start with, I think I'll use my larger, this is a 1-inch flat angle. Almost all my flats are also angled, because then I can turn it around and use the tip there and get into smaller areas, and don't have to keep grabbing a different brush. I can paint with the one that's in my hand. So that is what I like. Now let's see if I can switch to a screen that has my paint palette in it, and that's pretty good. Let's see if this one is better, because I want you to be able to see the colors I'm using. My ring light's making a big glare and I can't undo that. Well, I think the light was actually better in the other one. What do you think? Let's go back to that other screen. Pretty sure the lighting showed you my paint palette better in the other screen. There we go. Okay, except for that little bit of it that I'm covering up. Oh, but I can get rid of me in your picture. Give that a second. Okay, there. Sorry, it just takes a second for my my preview screen to catch up. Just that little tiny bit of lag. All right, I'm going to put a little bit of water in a puddle on my paint palette, which, Jackie, just for you, I cleared off. I cleared off my paint palette just for you, Jackie. And yeah, I know what you're saying. I have to get my face in the screen a little bit, because it feels wrong not just talking to you, and there's nothing but my hands right here, and I don't want to be one of those hand talking all the time people, but the temptation is there to do that when you can't see my face. So I put my face up in there when I'm talking, but done just talking. Okay, and clean paint palette. And I just got a puddle of water there. I'm not really sure if you can see how much water's there, but just a little bit of water moving around there on that palette. And that's going to allow me to put some color into it. Now the first thing I want to do, I told you we're going to be blocking in. And I think it would be beneficial for me to show you this one more thing real quick. This is not finished at all what I'm about to show you, so don't think this is a finished painting. This is right in the middle of working. This is what I'm calling blocking in color. I'm just putting the color where it's supposed to be, but I'm going to put more layers of color over top of this pumpkin, and I'm going to put more layers of color into the straw in the background there. More layers of color are going in everywhere here, so that we can build up a really rich painting, because fall and harvest time is you think of the richness of harvest and the richness of these colors. So we're gonna start building that up. And the first thing is I want to put something in the background. So I'm gonna just slop some water on here. I'm not even gonna try to get it really consistently covered with water. So just dab some water in everywhere that's background. And if you accidentally go over into your pumpkins, that doesn't hurt at all, because we're just blocking in light color. Excuse me. Excuse me again. And I drew this with a 6B pencil. That might have been a mistake because my graphite's smearing a little bit. Now back into this puddle on my paint palette, I want to put a little bit of some background color. I want to keep my background very, very light. I'm just going to pull this reference over in here instead of turning it on the screen. I want to keep a very light background, so it just gives the contrast, but I don't want it to be white or plain or, you know, solid color. So I'm going to just grab a little bit of my quinacridone gold and put it in that puddle, and I want to smear that all around and get it really, really light, because I don't want a bright bit of color on there at all. Now I'm going to dash some of that into the water that I put on there, right into this background. And I'm going to just get a little dab of, I'm using transparent red oxide today, but it is burnt sienna is a really good match for that as well. So I put a little bit of burnt sienna into the color, and I'm going to start dabbing it into some of these background areas. And again, it doesn't really matter if you get some of this color on the pumpkin or the leaves. Try to keep it off of your sunflower petals. But if some gets on there, it's not the end of the world. Okay, now I just have a little bit of color on there. You almost can't even see it. And now I just got some more water on my brush, and I'm just going to kind of smooth that around. Again, it doesn't matter if it gets on parts that are going to be darker, brighter color, because the darker color will cover over it very easily. All right, now with a really, really clean and damp brush, I'm just going to smooth a little bit there. I'm having to be careful on that because my pencil lead is wanting to smear, and I don't want a dirty looking background. I shouldn't have used that. You know what? I didn't use a 6B. I used my mechanical pencil. They don't usually smear like that. Maybe I bought the wrong ones. All right, right in here, I'm going to get a little bit of a darker color right back here in behind this. I don't even know what this weird thing is. I bought it at the store. It's that right there. It's just some dried thing. I don't know. There wasn't a label telling me what it was meant to be. I don't know if it's dried ragweed or who knows what. It wasn't really berries, so I don't know what it was. Anyways, behind all of that stuff and back here behind these places, I'm going to put a little bit darker color right in there, just because it will help that look good. What we're going to do with these later, we're going to put I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to take my X-Acto blade and drag it on there and kind of scrape a little bit of the surface of the paper and paint off there to make it a very light white line. We could, if we had the time to do it, use masking fluid on those. I like to use a ruling pen when I use masking fluid instead of a paintbrush. My ruling pen looks like this. It's like 100 years old. It's never going to get ruined, although it started falling apart, so I had to tape it back together. But you just use this little adjusting thing here to adjust the tips, open or closed more. It works sort of kind of like a dip pen or a fountain pen. Not a fountain pen, a dip pen, a quill pen. It works like that. You dip that in your masking fluid, and you can get super fine detailed lines with your masking fluid, and that's why I like the ruling pen. And also it cleans up real easy, unlike your paintbrush, so you don't have to ruin your good paintbrushes using masking fluid. But masking fluid adds a whole nother step in the form of waiting time, waiting for the masking fluid to dry, and then waiting for your painted area to dry before you remove the masking fluid. So I don't want to use that today. I'm just going to use the X-Acto blade method of getting some white highlights on there. Okay, now I'm going to just clean a little bit of that, but it doesn't really have to be cleaned. And I think that's some good color going on there. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. This one I think is 1/2 inch. And I'm going to get a little bit of a Purulene Violet color and put that out there. and I'm just going to touch some of that into some of these smaller areas in the get some color in the background, just because it looks good to have that in there. And again, we're blocking in the background at this point. The purpose of this is a couple of different things. We're bringing our picture out where we can see what's what better, but also by putting this color on in layers like this, it will allow us to come back in and do a little bit of wet into wet painting, and then also the layering, and we will get a really good depth of rich color going on from doing it this way. All right, that's pretty good, and that's just giving the hint of, see what my background is wet. I don't have much color on my brush, but I just put a couple of little strokes in there, and that gives the indication that there's something else in there. And because I want you to be able to see that, let's just zoom in quickly. Turn off my reference photo, and then hold this here. I just put that little bit of color in there, and because the paper's really wet, the color just melted right down into it, and we've got an indication of either shadows or something else a little bit farther away. It just puts a little bit of something that gives some interest into that background there, so it's not plain white or one solid color or boring or anything. So so there's that. Now unless it's a bother to anyone, I'm going to go ahead and leave this screen up without that reference photo. If you need the reference photo, holler at me in the chat and I'll put it back up there. But for now, we can stay zoomed in and get a better view of what I'm painting. Okay, so now I want to put this straw in the background, and so I'm going to put a bit of water there, and I'm going to again avoid painting on the sunflower petals. So just put a little water on there, and we're going to pick the lightest color in that straw and paint the whole thing with that, and this will block in where that straw is, and what it'll do is it'll make it more obvious where the leaves and the sunflower petals and things like that are. So there, I got water on that, and I'm just going to pick up some of the same color I had over in my paint palette and keep it real watered down, or just put a lot of water into it, along with the fact that we've got a lot of water on the paper. And I don't mean standing water on your paper. I mean that your paper is completely saturated, but there's not standing water in puddles on top of the page. So hopefully that makes you understand what I'm talking about with how much water. Okay, now there's a petal right there that I got a little color on. It's going to have some bright yellow on it. Oops, that's out of the screen, isn't it? Go there. It's going to have some bright yellow on it, but I don't want any dark brown in there, because I don't or dark color or gray or anything like that, because that will alter how the yellow looks later on. So I'm going to go back and clean that out in a minute. This one is a leaf, and it's going to be green. It's not going to hurt anything if I have lots of color painted over in that. But why I'm trying to paint around it is because I'm cluing myself in as to where the different parts are on my painting, and picking out the background areas, and just kind of defining the picture a little bit. So like right in here, I've got a flower stem or something across there. I think it's a shadow of that flower stem across there. And then I've got a leaf in there and another leaf here. So I'm going to paint this background of this straw in there. And also in the reference photo, you can see that it's dark back in these places. Well, I am going to add some darker color. In fact, I'll just add a bit of purple to my puddle right now to darken that a little bit. But again, I'm identifying where the different places are, the different parts of my painting with this first layer of sort of blocking in. And I hadn't got it wet down in this area, so I just added more water to my brush. Didn't even need to add more paint. I had some on there. So that's all in there. Now that has that, most of that straw is back there. I'm going to go back in, and I guess I'm going to have to stay on one of these. No, I'll just move this up. I want you to be able to see what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep it zoomed in at least a bit. Okay, right down in this area, in my reference photo, this is really bright, but I want to change that up a bit for the painting and just put some darker color down in here. So I'm going to add even a little bit more of my Winsor Violet to my puddle and darken that a bit more. And as long as the paper's still wet, it's going to just soften right into there. But that puts it looking like it's a bit in shadow, and I like that idea. Back in here is a little bit more shadow. And this is information. I'm doing this to give myself information about what's what in here. And while that is still really, really saturated and wet, it's a little too soon to add any more color to it. But I'm going to let it dry just a little bit, and I can tell from touching it, it feels really, really wet and cold to the back of my knuckles right here. I want it to still feel cold, but not so wet. And when it's at that stage, then I can just drag in a little bit more color, like I did over here, and it won't melt down in quite so much. It'll actually start to leave stripes of color in, and we'll get this appearance of individual grasses or straw or whatever that is in that bundle there. So that's how we're going to do that. So meanwhile, the next thing I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and just put a bunch of orange color in on my pumpkins, because again, I am just blocking in what is what, where things are going to be, and getting the base color going in there. So now I've got some Scarlet Lake and some quinacridone gold, and I'll switch to my paint palette so you can maybe see that a little bit. I didn't stir it really good. I don't like to over mix my paints, so it's just kind of a muddled bit of color there. And I'm going to spread this out a lot here. Put a little color on right on those stripes. Then get some more water in the brush and just start spreading that out, because I just want to block in where this pumpkin is going to be. Put a little bit darker color around the bottom, so that'll help later when we go to start giving it its form and shape. Drag a bit of the extra red color right down some of these spots. Go ahead and put a little bit more color on that side. Okay, and that's good for that pumpkin, and that is by no means finished. That's just our first layer there. Now I'm going to mix up a little bit more of this orangey sort of color, sort of kind of orange. You can get that with Scarlet Lake and quinacridone gold. Another color I like to use is I would take some of my my Aurelian yellow, which is also kind of like Hansa light or Hansa yellow, and put in some magenta or permanent rose or something like that, and you can get a really bright, pretty orange from that. So I'll just use that on this other pumpkin back here, but I don't want to really dark value quite yet. This can actually tend more to the yellow, because we're going to go back in and put the rest of the color on it. It's starting to thunder and everything outside, so I think it's good I went with closing my curtains today, closing my blinds, and going with artificial light. It's making a glare on my paper, but it's worth it, because otherwise we would be, I think my picture would be going in and out of focus. Now right here I changed my drawing right here. On the reference photo, what I was doing was just stacking things up. So there's a little bit of a gold, there's a candle inside of there in a little gold tin, and I don't want that in my painting. So instead of putting that in my painting, I'm just going to continue this pumpkin right down behind that sunflower back there. But I am going to use the darker color on it because it would be in a lot of shadow. So I'm putting that in there, and that is pretty good for now on that. Now I want to clean my paintbrush out really good, get it just kind of damp. Oops, I've still got a lot of that quinacridone. Really stains, and it's a strong pigment in my paintbrush here. Okay, so the paintbrush is now clean, and I'm going to use it to go back here and clean color out of my sunflower petals. And I just use that damp brush and just wiggle it back and forth in there. I don't have to get it back to perfectly white. I just really want to get it where I don't have dark blobs going on in there. So that is good for that. And I got a little bit of orange pumpkin color right here. Actually, on this sunflower, it isn't going to matter because we're going to put a deeper red in here. But just so that you see how to do it, you just put your clean damp paintbrush in there and wiggle that extra color right out of there where you don't want it. Okay, now I've got some background areas. I'm going to switch to an even smaller brush, and I'm going to paint some of this darker background back in here, which let's see here. I think it would be more important for you to see what I'm painting than to see the paint palette for this part. To see the reference photo. So I'm going to put the reference back in there so you can see what I'm talking about with this background parts. And did I press the right button? It's not popping up there. I think that should have it. It's not looking like it's doing. Oh, yep, there it is. Okay, so I'm gonna have to move this over a little bit. You know what? Just forgive me for a second. I'm going to switch to my other screen and just see which of these. This should have what I want. Yep, it does. Okay. Alright, hopefully that's showing you more of my painting, because I want you to be able to see this part right here while you can see the reference photo. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some Winsor Violet into my puddle that I had left, the colors that I was doing the pumpkin with. Just put whatever puddle of that you have left, put some Winsor Violet in there. Now I've got that on my brush, and I'm going to find all the little dark areas, like kind of underneath here, there's some really darker shadow in between some of these petals, and I'm just going to put that color in there. And I've got a lot of darker color up here underneath this sunflower, behind that one. So I want to find where those darker bits are and go ahead and put color in there. And what this does, it helps me to pick out where my flowers actually are. Where are the petals? Rather than paint the petals first, I'm just painting the background first. And let's see, I think there's, oops, that was a leaf. That's the background right there, but that's easily fixed. Rinse the color out of my brush and just lift it right back up from there. Because it's in the background, any color that gets left on here will just darken the green that I eventually end up putting on there, on that leaf, and that'll just make it look good. I don't have mistakes in my painting. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, now there's a lot of that really weird gold stuff right in here and some more leaves. I think I will, before I make another mistake on the note, before I make another little extra color thing happen, I'm going to go ahead and put some green on where my leaves are. And that's not the final painting of them, so you don't need to worry that you got it exactly perfect. We're just kind of identifying where things are with this initial wash of color. And keep in mind too, this is a fall picture, so we're not having oops, that should be, we're not having beautiful springy sap green leaves. We're having grayed down muted green leaves because it's fall. So your color choices are going to want to be a little bit more muted on your greens for your leaves and stuff. Alright, there's leaves in there. There's a leaf back there. That leaf's bending over, so I'm going to just put a little bit of a yellow in the top of it to make a distinction between the colors, so we can see that it is a turned leaf there. Okay, then I've got a green leaf right there. Wow, it's really thundering a lot outside here. Okay, I need a little bit of green right in here and here, and I'm going to put a stronger, little bit of a brighter green on this stem and this one as well. And then I've got the green bits of that flower. I've got a stem showing off of this sunflower up here, and a little bit of green. I'll put some more green right back behind there because that'll be pretty. That's pretty good on that. I think I've got all the leaves. Nope, I missed a big one right there. I'm going to put a little bit of a blue color into this just to change up the green color a little bit. and I used a verditer blue, I think it's verditer blue, which would gray this green down a little tiny bit. I'll put the brighter color on the top part where that leaf is also turned or turning towards me. Okay, now I'm going to put a little bit of a dark color right there where I think that's a shadow of the stem up above it. Put a little bit more dark right there. This got dry, but I'm going to go ahead and put a few strokes in to get some of the definition of that straw or grasses in the background starting to happen. And rub a little bit down that way for a little bit of extra shadow. Soften the edge with the water on the paintbrush. And I think I'll put a bit of that orange color in there just because I can. But not all over, just kind of in a couple of places. Then when that's, well, I'll do it now. I'm going to get a little bit of quinacridone gold, or whatever gold. You could actually use yellow ochre for this as well, I believe. Just water it down plenty, which I'm not there yet. There. And smear some of that on there. And get that starting to look more like grasses. Okay, I'm going to work on that some more later. And let's see here. Let's go back to this screen for a minute so we can get an overall look. Because what I want to do next is I need to block in some color on these leaves and on this vase that I have back in here. There's a dark blue vase hiding, tucked away back in there. So I'm going to put, I'm going to mix some indigo and a little bit of ultramarine blue and make a nice dark blue color. And just put that on back in there. Right where that vase is. And there's some dark bits of this showing through on this little green thing right here. This is a garden light, this green thing. But I'm not going to paint those yet. Okay, I'm going to paint this, the blue part that's down, showing right down in here. Then I'm going to add some of the Windsor violet to that little puddle of color and darken, while that paint is still wet, I want to darken some areas of that face. But I want to do it while the paint's still wet so it'll blend, and I'll get some nice shifting of the color in there. And then also, while it's still wet, and I think I'm going to zoom in for this part, there's a little tiny bit of a reflection happening on the top of this, so I need a clean, damp paintbrush, and I'm just going to drag some of that paint back off of there like that and create that reflection. And it comes a little bit down this side as well. Excuse me. Okay, so I just pulled a little bit of that color back off there, and that is creating my reflection. Okay, now, and that's probably all I will need to do to that at all. Okay, now I want to mix some of one of my greens. It doesn't really matter which one, because I'm going to mix it with a lot of my Aurelian yellow. And for this, I am going to make a springy green color, because this is a paint. This isn't foliage. And I'm going to paint right over that whole thing. There are some darker bits of this, some where there's little holes in this punched tin garden lantern. But I'm going to paint everything with this, the body color, and then go back later and add the dark bits. So I put that there, get a little bit of ultramarine, mix it in there, and put some, just dab on some color in a couple of spots so you don't have exactly all one color going on there, because it just adds more interest. And that's good for that right now. So that's what I call blocked in. And I'm going to go back later and I may glaze over a little bit yellow color to bring up the color, and I will definitely use my smaller brush to paint inside the little cutouts where you can see, let's see, I'll show you on this, where you can see dark inside of there, because it's, I think you call this punched tin, where you've got dark color back in there. So that gets added later. Now I want to put in a bit more dark. I think there's a lot of that gold yellow dried stuff right here, but I want to put some dark color coming out from under those petals. So I'm just going to get a little bit of my what's in my paint palette. I've got let's see, go back out and show you here. I've got some Winsor Violet left here and some quinacridone gold left over here, and I just ran those together. If I want it to be a little bit like, I don't quite like that color, so I'm going to get a little bit of my transparent red oxide, throw that in there, and that makes it a little bit of a richer color. Now it's too light, it's a little more violet, and that is a really good mix to put up under this petal right here. And then I'm just going to add some more water to bring it down in here, and I can grab some of the quinacridone just to remind myself that is that gold dried whatever it is. Put a little bit more of the dark right in there. And I don't have to make all of that well defined. It doesn't need to be. It's in the shadow. So again, let me zoom in so you can see that. It's in the shadow there, and we don't see all the details, and we don't honestly need to. So I'm just kind of filling in here and there, putting in some of the colors that would be in there to get that where it's starting to push these flowers forward a little bit. You can probably start to see that. Now let me go ahead and put color on the leaves on the bottom here, And I want to, oh, let's do this too. I want to put the centers in on the sunflowers. So you can see on this sunflower right here, the circle part here is darker than the center. On this one, it's a little bit opposite, and on this one, the lighter part is the circle around, and the darker part's the center. I'm going to paint them like I'm seeing them, but you can, just know flowers, the sunflowers are all different, so paint them whatever way you like them, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and start with putting water, and I'm just going to put water all over the center of this big sunflower right here in the front. This is to me the main focal point of the flowers. It's my favorite one anyway. I like the colors of it. So I'm putting water all over there, and I'm going to put some of the quinacridone mixed with just a little bit of the other messy stuff that's on my paint palette. Just put some of that out there in that center. Then I'll maybe touch a little bit of the transparent red oxide on the side there, and because it's all wet, it's going to just start mixing together. And I'm going to take a little bit of, I'll use the puddle that's left over from painting my vase, because I can add what was on my brush, the colors here, add to that puddle, and I get a really dark that's going to work good for most of this edge of this outer ring on the sunflower here. Now if it's too boring of a color, you can adjust it a little bit, and I think I will put a little bit more of the transparent red oxide on my brush, so I have a variation in the color, and also so that it's not going to be a boring color. And just start putting that in there, and my colors are going to run together, and I'm going to leave a little bit of spot that's white, because if you look in the reference photo, you see there are some sections where it's a little bit of white showing through. Now I grabbed some Purulene, I think that was Purulene, no, what is that? I have Windsor Violet, Purulene Violet, and I forget what the other one of these, Purulene Maroon, I think that is. I might be mistaken about that color. But anyway, it's a little bit too red. See how it is right there? It's a little too red. So I'm going to pick up some more of that indigo and violet mix that I had left over from painting the vase, and just flop that color right in there. And I'm trying to get a jaggedy sort of an uneven edge going in there. But I don't have to get it perfect yet, because this is once again the blocking in layer. So that's good enough for now. I can go back in there and make changes and add more, and pull out the color that I want and glaze on some more color. And by glazing on, I'm talking about we're going to glaze on some color that's we're just going to lay it down over top of the other color so you can see the underneath stuff coming through it. But we can glaze a different color over top of that and get some really rich depth going on there. Okay, while that is on my brush, I'm going to just drag it off here onto this straw, because I'm kind of using a little bit of a dry brush thing right there to enhance the look of texture in that grasses, since it's coincidentally on my brush anyway. That's pretty good. Put a little bit more of the warmer color right back in there. And then I'm going to use a little bit more of that violet to just put a little detail right there. There, good enough on that. Let's do these centers, because I can use the darker color I already have. This center tends a little bit more towards green, and let's see here. When I paint a larger piece like this, it's harder to get all of it in the frame at the same time. But this center of this flower is got a little bit more of a green tinge to it, so I'm going to do that one last and go ahead and do these other two smaller red sunflowers first, because I can use what's already on my palette and just scoop up the rest of that indigo and Windsor violet mix and flop that right into my yellows and red oxide mixes that are more brown, and I'll darken up my brown color. If I need to add a little more color, I would add a bit of indigo to that to darken it. And then I'm going to just put that color right in the center there. That is really, really dark, and I think that might be darker than what I want, but for just the blocking in, I'm going to just go ahead and use it. So I'm going to put those centers in where they are so I can see those. Then while that's still wet, I'll get some of the quinacridone gold, mix a little bit of the dark color into it, not much but a little, take most of it off the brush, and then put that around the edges. And if it runs over into the dark center color, that is okay, because we'll want it looking like that eventually anyhow. So that's good. Now I'm going to use that same color that I just used here to get a start on the center up here. And then I'm going to pick up some, let's see what I want to go with. I guess I'll get a little bit more indigo and just mix some of my quinacridone into it and have a really dark, almost greenish look going on there. And just put that color in and kind of drag it around. To get that center looking good. And it's, again, it's okay if you leave some little white specks showing in there, because there are some little white tips of the seeds are starting to mature in these things, and they got the little white bits on there. Alright, now we've got a little bit of a center of this flower showing just on its edge, and the same for this one here. I think I'm going to put more of the transparent red oxide onto my brush so that this reddens up a little bit. And if it's not, because I want it a little less green. If it's not going where you want it, then rinse your brush and just get a nice dark, maybe the burnt sienna and Windsor violet or something like that, to get a nice dark color that does not look greenish, and fill in the centers on these flowers. There's not a lot of it showing on this one, but just a little bit. And it gives the appearance that that's a flower that's kind of hanging, the blossoms hanging down. I probably painted more on there than what is actually in the reference photo, but it doesn't hurt anything. Little bit of editing as I go. Okay, now I'm going to rinse most of that out of my brush, but then I'm going to use what's left to block in the stems on these two pumpkins. And I'm going to leave that little bit right in there not having any color on it, because it's somehow lighter. And I want this really light because I'm going to put some yellow green over top of it. This one is going to be a darker green brown. And when I'm working with these darker colors, it is a little bit more important to not go out of bounds too much. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush so that I can keep my details where I want them. I'm just going to go ahead and mix more green into that one. And that one is looking pretty good already, even though it's not ready to call it finished. It's looking good. Okay, now I'm going to lift some sort of stripes out of here because this stem is real viney. So I want to lift a little bit of color out just to give that indication that that's viney. Then I can go back when I'm done with that. Let's zoom in so I can show you what I'm talking about. When that's dry, I can go back in there and just lightly glaze over a bit of additional color, and that stem will look really pretty. And you'll see the variation in color, and it'll really look like one of those twisted viney kind of stems. Okay, so now I'm going to put some color on these flowers in the bottom here. The leaves in the background on the on this side are more orangey in my reference, and I'll probably keep them like that. This one is very close in color to the pumpkin, so I can just get some of the same colors that I used in the pumpkin there, where I had two different versions, quinacridone gold and Scarlet Lake, or the Aurelian or Hansa yellow with permanent rose. And I want this to be a brighter yellow, so I'm going to get a bunch of that other color out of my brush. That's not doing it for me. There we go. That is quinacridone gold with a lot of water in it. Okay, now the leaf that's up on the top there is the similar color, so I'll just scrub some of this color up in there too. I kind of push my color around on my paper more so than excuse me, more so than laying it on there a lot of the time. Okay, that looks good. I need a little touch of a background color right back in there. Darken that up a little bit. You can use a brown or a purple to do that. Now under here I'm going to use more a darker bit of the quinacridone with a little touch of the Scarlet Lake color right in there to differentiate that from the other leaf above it. But then I'm going to move into the lighter yellow color again. So I want the darker color up under the edge of that, which pushes the other color forward, the other leaf I mean. Then get the red out. And that's good. I've got a little bit of background color back there, and I'm going to make it be tinged towards green or blue right back in behind there. Now while this is still kind of sort of a little bit wet, I'm going to use a darker bit of the quinacridone and Scarlet Lake and just drag in some color on the veins of the leaf. maybe a little bit around the edges again. And the same on this one up here. And I want some of that color up underneath this pumpkin. And I'm going to add some of the transparent red oxide or burnt sienna down under that part. And I'm going to end up dragging some of that up onto the pumpkin, but for now it's good just like that. And then I want to get, see, I'm going to go ahead and touch a little bit of that. This is my transparent red oxide, but you could also use burnt sienna for that. I just like to touch a little bit of that in there for some additional color. And then I'll put some water over that and spread that a little bit, and that'll look really good. But I want to get a lot of that rinsed out of my brush and then just drag it over top of that dried gold thing there. Okay, now with just water on my brush, I'm just going to kind of knock those down so they look a little bit more natural. Kind of spread that out just a little bit with just water on the brush. And that's already starting to look really pretty good for those leaves, and I'm going to put yet another layer on it before I'm done. Now for the leaves on this side, let's see, it needs to come down here. I've got some really red leaves here. For that I'm going to use some of this Purulene. Oh, what color is that? I think it's, I thought they were all violets. I apologize, I can't remember the name of this color. It's either Purulene Violet, or it might be, if there's such a thing, quinacridone violet. Or Purulene Magenta, that might be what it is. Anyways, it's one of those really nice, really warm purpley colors. I'm going to put a little bit of the Scarlet Lake into that. And now probably got way too much on my paintbrush. I'm going to start with this bottom leaf just because I think that's the case. Yes, it is. So I'm going to wipe some of that off there and just put this dark color right in along the bottom. And I will end up dragging some of this up into the pumpkin there, but I'm not going to do it quite yet. Let's see, add some water to my brush and go ahead and put this one in up here. And I want this one to be a little bit redder, so I'm going to get a little bit more of the Scarlet Lake on my brush. And just go right into it. And I don't really want the red on the top edge of the pumpkin right up here. I want to keep it off of that, so that pumpkin stays forward really good. You know, keeping the red off the pumpkin there will make it easier to sell the idea that this leaf is back there behind that pumpkin. Alright, now I'm going to get, I guess I'm just going to drag my brush through some of my really darker violety purples, so I can just drag it through there a little bit and get some dark color on those veins. And then I've got some other parts that there's a green leaf in front of that. So I'm going to rinse most of that color out of my brush and just drag some red into here. And then there's a green leaf there and a green leaf there, so they've got a little bit of red right there. And I'll put a little bit of gold in here. And none of this really matters a whole lot. It's just the background, and you just want some pretty color there. I'm going to go ahead and lay some of that quinacridone right over top of there because it looks pretty. Okay, now I want to make a green that is, I'm going to take quinacridone and put it in, I've got a weird green going on here that I mixed with some indigo when I made the color for my sunflower up at the top. Although looking at that, that looks pretty ugly, so I'm going to start over on that. That doesn't look ugly. My color that I'm mixing for over here didn't come out good. So I'm going to just put some ultramarine into that quinacridone and put that right on here and just drag it onto that leaf. Drag it right off the edge of the page, and again, don't get it on the front of the pumpkin because it's meant to look like it's behind that pumpkin. Now that's a little confusing because obviously I paint right off the page on the tape. If I clean that paint off the tape, then you get a better idea of what the finished thing looks like on that edge. It's just some leaves and stuff that we can't really see all the details of it, so it's not really important that you paint it exactly perfect. Just get some color on there that sells the idea of that you've got more of this fall foliage going on back behind there. Okay, now I'm gonna, I like that color, and I'm gonna loosen it up a little bit with some water and glaze a little bit of it on top of this pumpkin stem. That's too much. I just laid it on there, and then I'm going to put a little tiny bit on that center part in there. Then I'm going to switch to a different brush and paint it into that. This is where I'm going to use my round brush and take the darkest bit of that color that I've got here and just add that color right on. Oops, not getting it on my brush good. I'm going to add that color right into this little stemmy thing that's part of the vininess of this pumpkin stem. And I need some darker color when it gets around the corner over to here. A little darker right on there. And then I'm going to just use a little of that to enhance the vine factor that I've got going on in here. And that stem is probably done because I like it like that. Okay, now I'm going to go back in my indigo and darken one of my yellow-green puddles. My nice clean paint palette is not looking clean anymore. It's got color all over it and little mixes of this and that. But as I'm painting, I don't start over with the fresh color for each individual thing that I'm doing. You get more consistency and continuity in your painting as you go if you keep using what's on your palette. And since I did start out with the clean palette, everything that's on here is on here somewhere, so it's safe to say whatever I'm picking from there and putting over here, I'm going to have this continuity in my overall painting because I've got all the same colors all over it. I just added a lot of indigo to this little puddle that was a yellow-green up here that used to be what I did in that sunflower up in the top, and I'm going to use this on the side of this pumpkin stem. And if you can see the reference photo right now, I don't have it on my screen, but if you're looking at it, you'll be able to see this side over here is much darker, but it still has a green appearance overall to it. So that's why I'm using this greenish color. And that's probably all I'm going to do to that pumpkin stem. Now let me zoom in on that so you can hopefully get a good look at what I've got going there. And I also think it's time for me to just step back for a second. Oh, one thing before I do, I want to get water on my brush and just with clean water, just kind of do what we did on the other leaf, knock that vine color down a little bit to sit that down into that leaf a little better. Probably should have done it sooner, but I can just glaze a little bit more of the red color over top of it. It does the same sort of thing. Okay, now I'm going to take a little step back. See, that's what I was trying to show you about the stem of that pumpkin. And remember, these pumpkins are not finished. Nothing on here is finished actually yet. So there's the whole thing in the screen, hopefully. It is really, really thundering and raining. But I'm going to step back for a second and look at this. Oops, I don't have it all in the screen, do I? In the frame, I mean. I wonder if I've bumped my camera because I thought I had it set up that, well, there, that's got it all in there. All right, now, I'm taking a drink of my used to be hot apple cider. It's cold now, but it still tastes good. So have a little sip of my apple cider and just take a look and see where I'm at. I'm just kind of taking inventory. Seeing that I've got to put some yellow color on this. I've got to do whatever I'm going to do with the dark golds or the deep golds on this this dried floral piece. I've got to get my reds here, and I want this red of these flowers to be a slightly different red than the reds that I've got on these leaves over here behind the pumpkin. So these are going to be an orangey red, but they're going to be I need to make them stand out from the oranges in the pumpkin. So the pumpkin orange is going to be more yellow, and this is going to be more red orange. So yellow orange, red orange. This, I like how the color came out on this pretty good, just like this. So I don't think I need to add a whole nother layer to this. I'll probably just glaze on a little tiny bit of yellow and a spot or two, and then put my dark colors in. And that'll be all I need to do for this. This one's looking fine. I'm almost satisfied with the grasses. I think I'm going to want to paint the flowers and then look and see how the grasses look at that point. So overall, it's looking good. It's not finished, but it's really starting to take shape and look good. And all of this is, I can approach this from a really relaxed standpoint of I'm not trying to get the finished thing all in one go, and it's like takes the pressure off me to get it perfect the first time. And also, I have learned that painting in these layers or glazing on layers gets me that really rich depth of color going on. So it's, you know, a win all the way around, because I get to paint with no stress, and I end up with something that looks really pretty by doing it that multiple steps way, multiple layers. So I'm guessing no one has any questions, because I'm not seeing anything popping up in the chat. It is 3:15, and we're going to go on for a little while. I'm going to try to go ahead and get this finished, and I should be able to do that. I don't normally paint fast, except if I'm painting for an exhibit. I've got a deadline, or got a commission of some sort, or like today we're on a schedule. Normally when I'm just painting for myself and enjoying painting and having fun with it, I take a lot of time. I would maybe work on this for a while and then walk away and come back hours later or even the next day, and really take my time and just enjoy the process of painting. Let's see, Jackie, your question is trying to keep up with me and looking at the reference at the same time. Okay. Is it? I keep wanting to zoom in, because when we've got the full screen like this, I feel like you can't really see the detail that I'm trying to show you. So I zoom in, and then when I'm zoomed in, if I leave the reference, it's like the reference takes up the whole or too much of the frame. So I take the reference out. Is it better if I go ahead and leave the reference in there? You know, even though it does cover up a lot of the screen, I feel like I want to show you the reference, the paint palette, and what I'm working on all at the same time, but then maybe you can't see any of it really well. So, you know, that's I don't see it the way you guys are seeing it out there in YouTube land. So you know, at least not until later when I go back and look at the recording. It is a lot to concentrate on. But see right there, I've got part of, you can see part of my painting I'm working on, but a lot of it is covered up with the reference photo. So if I make the reference photo much smaller, does it do you any good to have that reference up there if it's considerably smaller than that? For example, the screen that has, you know, everything on it. Let's see here. Because that's got me and the reference, but we're kind of small. And then my paint palette. But in this view, for whatever reason, in this camera, the paint palette seems to be too dark. Okay, so I'll leave it like this. We'll go with it like this for a little while, and we'll see how that works. Okay. Now, let's see. I think I will start working with some yellow on here. I'm going to put the yellow in of this flower petals and this flower's petals, and I'm going to glaze some yellow over on top of this pumpkin. So to do that, I'm going to use the larger of my small flat angled brushes. It's, I think, a 1/2 inch. So I've got a lot of water on it, and I'm going to just get, let's see, to do these flower petals, I'm going to use my Aurelian, which is like, Aurelian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Aurelian yellow or Hansa yellow, any one of those. It's a nice, bright, clean yellow. And I just got a bunch of it on my brush, and I'm going to just brush it into all of these. Look at that, I really do have a bunch of it on the brush there. Just brush that in. It's like I'm painting with gouache instead of watercolor. Add a bit more water in there. Just brush that into those petals and kind of put it down here and draw it out to the end there. And I just kind of push that paint around on my paper. I use the brush almost more like a sponge than a brush. So just pushing that color in. And I'm not trying to get a consistent coverage. I do like the way it looks when some bits are lighter, some are darker, some are more heavily pigmented than others. So I do that on purpose. Alright, there's the yellow of that flower. Now I want to just drag my brush through any one of these more reddish colors that I've got on the paint palette, and just get the tips having a little bit of that color on it, so I can pull some of that into these petals from the base of the petal. And I want to take use a light hand with that. Don't overdo it. And then rinse most of that color out, and then with just water in the brush, just kind of knock those down a little bit where they're too strong. And I like that pretty good. Now I need a little bit more of a yellow aspect going on in my center of my flower, and I can sort of get that by, because I mixed indigo and yellows, if I just take a little bit, if I lift a little bit of that color back out of there, I get a really soft yellow glow happening, because I'm lifting some of the color, and what it's leaving behind is more of the yellow. So I just softened up that center a little bit, and I'll probably end up just I may, let me see here. I think I'll just drag my brush through my greenish, you know what, that's too black. I don't like that color. I'm going to get rid of that one. It looks green like this when it's light, but, well, okay, I'll leave it there. I'm just going to put more indigo over here, because I want it to be a prettier color, and I don't want it to be black. Alright, so then I've got some indigo on there, and I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just darken at these edges a little bit. Just to kind of add some form and make the shape of that pop a little bit. There, I like that pretty good. If you can't see that really well, let me know and I'll zoom in on it for you, because that looks good like that. What I just did to that made that one perfect. I think I'm almost ready to call that one finished. I will go back in and shade the petals a little bit. You can't really see it a lot in the reference photo. You're not seeing a lot of shading or shadow between the petals. But on the painting, I need to put a little bit in anyway, even though it's not there in the reference, just to make it pop and look better in the painting. So that's a thing where I'm going to do something on my painting that's not in the reference, but it's necessary to make it look good. But I'm going to give that a minute and let it kind of gel in my mind exactly what I want to do, because I don't see it in the reference. So I have to think about it to figure out what I want to do on my painting, so I get it right on my painting. And meanwhile, this dark color that I have, I need to darken my background in here a little bit more too, back behind that flower. And this color that I have on my brush is perfect for that. So I'm going to go ahead and put some dark color back in here and kind of tweak the shape of that stem that I have back in there. Doing that though will help kind of make these things that are in there pop and look good. And because it's the greenish blue, it's got a little bit of the aspect of the foliage going on, so you can shadow, shade and color in the background there, and you get the right appearance, looking like there's a lot more thick foliage or something going on back in behind there. Just going to put a shadow underneath that. A little bit under there. And I don't really know, you know, I can't say I'm painting a leaf or whatever like that. I'm just painting kind of a background something is back there, and I don't really need to know exactly what it is. It's a jumble of all the pretty colors that I have going on in my painting. And it doesn't need to be really well defined in order for you to view it as being really pretty. Okay, so that looks pretty good for that. Now, let's see. I think I want to go ahead and put some color on that big thing sticking up right there. I'm going to use quinacridone gold for that, but I might mix some yellow ochre into it. I'm going to do it with my round brush. So here's some quinacridone in a little puddle, and I'm going to just take a little bit of this yellow ochre and see what happens. It's got a little bit of more of opacity, the yellow ochre does. The quinacridone is probably more transparent than the yellow ochre. So the yellow ochre is just going to give me a little bit more substance in this. And I'll just start painting that on there and wiggling. I've got my brush on the page, and I'm just kind of wiggling it around, because there's all these little bitty tiny round dried ball things in whatever this is. So I want to go back in. I want to enhance that roundness, and I want to go back in and put some darker spots in it. But again, on this, I'm going to leave some lighter spots. And I usually remember to mention, I don't think I did today, my drawing is a lot darker than what I normally would draw for my normal paintings. But I need to, oh, there's my head. My laptop camera is right here, so when I'm looking at you, it's got my face, but I forget when I'm looking down. That's why I like to turn that off when I'm painting. Otherwise, you're seeing the top of my head. I need to paste a picture, a smiley face picture, on the top of my head, so when I'm painting, you see you see something other than the top of my head. Anyway, I'm gonna leave a little bit of white dots showing in there, and then I'm gonna, while it's still wet, get one of my darker, like I'll probably use the transparent red oxide, because I like that color. But I just got the base going with that bit of color, and I'm going to get now some transparent red oxide on my brush. I don't want it too drippy, but a little bit. And I'm just going to put some darker bits in there. Again, don't be too heavy-handed with this part. And I'm hoping you can see that good. I really feel like I need to zoom in so you can see that. But that looks pretty. Now I could take some really dark brown and just put a couple of dots here and there. In fact, since I have that color on my brush, the transparent red oxide, if I drag it through this little puddle that has indigo in it, that'll turn it to a nice dark color, and I can put just a little touch here and there, not very much, but just that little tiny bit will enhance it. Add that another layer to what I've got going on. And again, I'm using a kind of a bouncing method, bouncing my brush around on this paper. I like that. I just want to zoom in and show that to you up close. I can't see it on my preview screen, but my preview screen is like this big. So maybe you guys are seeing it a lot better than I am, but I think that I need to zoom in so you can see. Now let's see what I've got there. That right there, I like how that came out. I think that whole area is looking real pretty. So I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to do that again over here. and then I've got a whole bunch of it. So I've got some there, and I've got a whole bunch of it in here and a little bit down at the bottom. So I am going to go back to the screen we're working with, and I'm going to just go ahead, and while I've got that method figured out and working good, I'm going to put that everywhere that it is on my page. So let me go right here. And again, this painting this in here, I'm painting around these flower petals, and what I'm ending up with, I just have to get rid of my head out of the top of that screen. It's bugging me. You're going to see the corner of my paint palette behind there, but I'd rather you looked at that than looked at the top of my head. Anyways, I'm painting around these flower petals, but I am painting a thing. I'm painting this floral thing. But while I'm painting this floral thing, I want you to notice I'm doing negative painting around these flower petals. So you can think of when you're trying to do negative painting, think of like you're painting the tabletop underneath whatever you're working on, or you're painting the wall behind it or something like that. It makes it easier to understand what the negative painting is if you're not trying to tell yourself I'm painting these flower petals negative. That's like, huh? But all you're really doing is you're painting around them. But as I'm painting this floral piece back behind this leaf, this petal, look how nicely it makes that petal show up. So I put my yellow ochre and quinacridone gold mixture on there. Now I'm dotting in some transparent red oxide. I'm going to dot in now just a little tiny bit of dark. Little bit of dark detail. And I can darken it right down in here where it's really behind the petals. Could do that right there too, actually. Okay, that piece is done and looking good. Okay, more quinacridone and yellow ochre to go in this area here. Now, in the reference photo, you'll see this is going kind of haywire all over the place. So you can look closely at the reference photo. Sometimes I find it easy to look closely, you know, to have my tracer handy so I can look and see exactly what I drew. But in this case, I didn't draw every little bit of this because I figured it would be easier to look at the reference photo and just kind of make it up as I'm going, because I'm just going to mix this into that background there, and I can paint some in where I don't even have some drawn in. And because we sort of blocked it in with color already, we've got a background going, and it's going to be a smooth transition no matter what we do, no matter how I paint it. But I do need to keep my plenty of paint on my brush and keep it plenty wet so that it flows easily off my brush. It was getting a little dry there, and the appearance of it is wrong. So keep plenty of paint on your brush. Keep it plenty moist. let's see, here's this stem goes into petals, and I've got a little bit of this right here. And then a little darker background or leaves or something. And for this part, as long as you end up with some color pretty much mostly everywhere in here, you're not going to need to paint photorealistic work right in here. It's just going to look better if you just kind of get the general idea of this on there. You're going to have a prettier overall appearance by not trying to get it too accurate to the photo, if you will. And if you get it where you don't want it, just clean your brush and lift it back off of there. And what I've got going on here is I decided to put this color here, and I had already put background color there, and it was a little too much, so it was starting to look muddy, so I'm just lifting it back off there. And I'll let that dry, and I can go back in and put the color back on there, and it'll look good. So if you get a muddy area going, don't think you've ruined your paper. Just use a clean brush and lift the excess paint back off. Dot in. I don't want a whole lot of real obvious, well-defined detail in here, because this is the background area, and I just don't want it too well defined. But I am going to go ahead and drop in some bits of the transparent red ochre in there. Red ochre. Nope, transparent red oxide. That. I don't like the look of that, so that's better. Okay, overall I think I'm liking this area. I'll just dab a little of that on there, glaze that color on, and then I don't have to define it. It's got the right colors, and my eye will do the rest for me without me having to really well define that painted area there. Okay, now I have one more little bit of that stuff down here in the bottom. While I've got this color on my brush, I'm going to just I added a little bit more water, turn my brush sideways, and just go ahead and start pulling some of that color up into that pumpkin right there. And that just sets that pumpkin down right there in the midst of all that foliage really well. I sort of just washed color up on there. That's what I really did right there. And I like how it looks, so I'm going to wash some more red right into the edge of this. And without totally obliterating that line, I'm going to pull some of that right up into this side of this pumpkin. And then I can soften it out into the leaf. And that looks good. Okay, now I think I want to put the green color on these leaves. These leaves have a really unique coloring. There's some purpley color in these small leaves at the front here. And then the larger leaves have almost a greenness to them. So let me see if I can build a color that I like for those leaves. I'm just going to add water and kind of loosen this green puddle that I had on my paint palette already. It's just the one that I liked best. So when you're deciding what color to paint yours, just find on your palette a color that you think is pretty close, add a bunch of water to loosen it up, and then pull in some other colors to alter the color to get it where you like it. Because really this flower, it's a fake sunflower, but we want it to look real, so you want it to look pretty. And I'm using a color that I like and think looks pretty, and you should do the same. Mine is a very, very pale green that I'm putting in here, and I'm not covering all of the leaves with that green color. All of the petals, I mean. Okay, that's probably enough of the green color. Now I'm going to get a little bit of this orangey, light orangey color, keeping it real light. I'm going to just touch in a little bit of this color in a few places. That's enough. Now I want to add a little bit of yellow and possibly just a little bit of one of my purples to kind of brown it down a little, but I want a super duper light, like a really, as close as you can get to some sort of a beige color. And I'm going to just float some of that in. I'm kind of using a lot of water here on this part. Okay, now I'm going to probably want to let that dry mostly. And then I will take my clean brush with clean water on it and knock some of that down and bring a little bit of the white back in some places. And then I want to just take my time and look at it and see where it needs shadows. Like up in here, I need to shade a little bit of this and put some shadow in. And I need to work on the center of this flower a good bit so that I can make it have the shape and form and look pretty. So I've got a darker version of this light purpley color, and I'm going to just start putting some in at the edge here so I can draw some out. Okay, so I put the color there, rinse it out of my brush, and with water on the brush, just draw that out but only into that petal, not all over the whole, all those flowers. I want to keep this purpley color confined to these small little petals right at the center of the flower. And then I'm going to put a little bit darker right at the edge of the center, and while everything's wet, it'll kind of do a little bit of running together. Can use that to indicate a little bit of definition in the spaces between some of these petals, but you want to do it while it's all wet, so it'll all run together and look like it all goes together. I need to mix up a bit more of that color. I'm using the Perylene Violet and some of this indigo green whatever puddle. And just dot that around on there. This is the part where I really like to just take my time and go slow. I'm rushing a little bit for you guys because we are at almost 2 hours, and I get a little bit ready to be done after 2 hours online, or 2 hours working on the same thing. It's not that I don't have the attention span, but I think my body is a little bit older now, and I kind of need to take a break and do something different when I've been at the same thing for too extended of a period of time. I'm just rubbing a little bit of the same color that I used on those things up there, rubbing that in on top of here, but I want to be careful putting it over top of the purple because there is more of an opacity or opaqueness to this yellow ochre that's in this mix, and it'll look muddy over top of this dark color if I'm not careful. I'm just darkening the purple on some of these petals in here. And then I can put those lines out, the darker lines, and they make a really nice appearance. Now this gets really super messy down in here. So just make something that kind of gets the indication of petals going kind of every which way down in this part. I've got a little bit of the color that would be on the wall back there, but it's darker. So I'm going to put some darker color back there. And leave those petals light. But I do probably want to put a little green on them. And then I want to put a little bit more of the lines like I was putting there. And that's kind of a cross between the purple and the green. Some of these lines are really, really light, but they're just like veins in the petals, I think. So I want to get them in there, but have them stay really light. And just kind of work at that to pick out petal shapes, and then also maybe add a bit more indigo around the edges here. Let's see. I've kind of lost that one sticking up there, so I'll probably, let me just paint around something there, and I'll probably go back in later and lift some paint out there to put that little watered up or bent up petal back in. Anyway, I just want to give an indication of a little bit of a textured center of that flower, and I think I'm there on that one, so I'm going to leave that one for the moment and do something else, because once I get to the part where I think, yeah, that's probably done, I need to stop or else I'll overdo it. I can always go back in later and add more paint, but it's not ever going to have that same appearance, that same freshness, if you realize you put too much paint in and you have to go back in and lift some out. You can lift paint out and make it look good, but it's not going to have the same freshness as if you did not put too much paint in and you stopped when you needed to stop and left it there. So that one I'm going to call done for the moment, and I'm going to switch to my round brush again and mix up some well, I think I'm going to just take this transparent red oxide straight off my palette. You could do the same thing with your burnt sienna if you want to. And I'm going to just start putting in some petals over here in this flower. The burnt sienna or the red oxide make a really good color to start on this red colored sunflower. Then I can go back in with some Scarlet Lake on my brush and redden up some spots. I think I'm going to let that dry just like that. And then if I need to do anything more to it, I can always add a little bit more dark detail. Like I take one of these dark magentas, the really warm violets, I mean, and put a little bit of color like right there. But I might also want to go and glaze on some yellow on that. But that right now, that looks pretty. So I'm going to leave that one like that and then go to do these two. So I need the transparent red oxide on my brush and just pick out where these petals are. Got a little bit too much moisture on there. Pick out where some of these petals are and just push some paint onto your paper. This one is in an odd position because the petals of the flower above it are kind of pushing down into the top bit of petals right up here. So you're gonna have odd shaped petals up there. You want to keep that in mind when you're painting them. And you can get some really dark color on some of the spots and some light color on some of the other spots, because you do want to have that variety going on there. And I'm going to go ahead and start adding in some Scarlet Lake to vary up the color a little bit. here. It's a petal that goes right out that way. And the petals of this flower and this flower run together right here. Okay, I'm going to put some yellow in a little bit in a minute, but I need that to mostly dry before I get to that point. So now I'm going to, let's see, I want to put some of the violet color right back in here, because that's going to push the other flower forward a little better. So while everything is wet and the colors will blend together nicely, I want to put this color in here, and then I think I'm going to put a little bit of that right on that center, just to darken that center a little bit there. Add a little bit of the red oxide in there. Okay, I'm gonna probably glaze a bit of more quinacridone gold or something over that part, but I need that to dry before I do that. So now I've got a lot of the dark color in my brush. I don't really have a lot more places that I need a dark petal. Let's see, maybe a little bit over on this edge. Just kind of start it going out that way, and then I'll pull it out there with some water in a minute. Okay, I'm going to get that out of my brush, get some clean transparent red oxide, put that in here. Okay, now I've got color there, and I need to move it around and make it fit the shape of the petals. So I'm going to rinse most of that out and get some Scarlet Lake on here, and I'm going to start drawing this Scarlet Lake back into that other color, or the other bits of color that I have going on here. And making it look more like flower petals. And where I want the color a little bit lighter out at the ends, I put the color on at the end and push it towards the center of the flower. Then I think I'm going to get some quinacridone gold. I need plenty of water in it so it's really yellow and not the gold color. And I'll put some of that on top of these reds, and that'll blend together and make a real pretty color in this sunflower. So as I'm putting that on here, I'm just kind of smoothing those colors together. And again, tweaking the shape that I got going on so that I end up with flower petal shapes. Now it's gotten a little bit all stirred together over here, So when that's dry, I'm going to take some darker color and go back in and pick out some details so I can bring my flower petal shapes back into being there. And I need some of this darker color in my center of this one. So I'm going to use that same bouncing circles technique and get that center doctored up real good there. Okay, bye Jackie. Thanks for painting with us today. And I think because of time, and I think people will be starting to need to leave, I don't know, but I don't want you to leave before I do these pumpkins. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to pumpkins right now. So I've got some of my Aurelian yellow right here. I got a good bit of that. So I'm just going to take that on my brush and just paint it right over top of that whole pumpkin that I got there. And get that covered just like I was covering it with water, but I'm covering it with the yellow paint. Okay, now I want to take my brush through my Scarlet Lake and my transparent red oxide, knock them down a little bit on my paint palette, and then I'm going to just put color on where these lines are. Now I want less of that color in my paintbrush now, mostly just water, and knock those down to soften them a little bit. And that is close to where I want to be on that one. I am going to clean my brush out a little bit here and drag out a little highlight right here. Okay, that's just going to be a little bit of a highlight. And maybe I'll put a little bit of one right here too. Yeah, I like how that looks. Okay. That guy's starting to have some shape. Once again, I will tell you, my pencil lines are really showing a lot on this one today because I had I have to draw darker lines so that my camera will pick these things up when I'm showing it to you on screen like this. Ideally, you would draw lighter with your pencil. Once this is dry, I can go back in and kind of erase out some of these pencil lines. They're not all going to come out. They're just not, because I drew them pretty dark, but that's so that the camera will pick them up. You can draw your lines a lot lighter and end up with something a little bit prettier. Have less pencil lines showing anyways. And then, you know, some people think that the pencil lines showing in their artwork are they're not a detraction. They like them. Alright, what I've got going here is I added some Scarlet Lake to that puddle of Aurelian yellow that I had going on there, and I'm just going to really orange up this pumpkin. I want to leave a little bit of white in a couple of places for highlights. And if I want to just put some straight yellow on in a couple of spots, that is good too. Especially, oops, that's a little too much. Paint and gouache with watercolor again. I had to just refill the Aurelian in my paint palette right before we started today, so it's wetter than I've usually got it in the palette. but I'm just going to use my brush to spread that paint around, and that looks pretty good. So this is getting a nice rich color going in here, just from glazing on more color on top of the color we originally had. This thing's looking good, and I'm not even finished with it yet. I'm gonna once again get some transparent red oxide and just kind of put these lines here, which indicate where the the shape that the pumpkin has going on here. And you can touch in little bits of color, and you can wipe in large amounts of it. You just do this however much that makes it like you like it. And I'm using a little bit of Scarlet Lake over here on this side to redden it up a little bit more than the transparent red oxide does. I'm going to take the tip of my brush and just put a little tiny bit of red right there, and I want a little bit more red right up in there, a little bit more right here. That's good. Then I'm going to take and rinse most of that out of my brush, and then just with the water on there, once again, knock that stuff down with clean water to smooth it out a little bit. You don't want to make it go all the way away, but you do want to smooth it out just a little bit. And you can just add more yellow, add more orange, add more red till you get it where you like it. So it's got a nice, richly colored round shape to it. Now I'm protecting this spot right here. I want this to stay lighter. Okay, with just put a little bit more of that right there. Okay, with most everything out of my brush. Well, before I do that, I need a little bit of an adjustment right here. Okay, most everything now out of my brush. I want to smooth that area over, but I don't want to darken it. I'm going to put a little tiny bit more yellow over it. Bit more yellow. I'm just kind of laying this yellow right on top of the other paint that's there. I'll lay a little bit more red right on right there. Mostly I think I like that. I'll probably come back and look at it like tomorrow or the next day and see. And I may tweak it a little bit. But that's looking good. Now I need to put the yellow on the petals here and the dark in the color in there. I'm going to use, again, this puddle that I've got going that's pretty dark over here. Just add a little more indigo to it. That's pretty good. And I'm gonna just if you look at the reference photo, you see all of those things are not solidly colored in, so I don't need to solidly color all of them. And I'm just laying that color right in on top of the other color. And getting some parts of it darker than others. I've actually got a yellow spot in the middle of this one where that part of that flower shows through there, so I'll leave that alone for now. And that's all I really need to do to that one. Maybe once it's dry, I might soften up a couple of those spots a little bit. But for now, that looks pretty good. Now I want to take a little bit of a dark brown. So I'm going to take some of my red oxide, make another little puddle here, scoop up some of that, put it in there, and I've got a nice dark brown. I'm going to use that right on here. Oops, got that too heavy. What I'm doing is I'm applying a little bit of color here, and then I'm going to go back in a bit and use, it has to be dry before I do it, but I'll use my X-Acto blade to scrape along this thin line here, and it'll scrape some nice white highlights onto it. And that'll be all I need to do on that. Okay, let's see. I am going to go ahead and throw some yellow on there real quick. And in with this yellow, I've got some red, similar to what I did up there, but it's darker. It shows up more on this flower than it does on the other one. So I'm just throwing on my bright yellow. Once I get that all on there, covering everything up, then I'll take the red while this is still wet, and I'll use a combination of Scarlet Lake and transparent red oxide. In fact, I'm going to scoop up some of that brown I just made, put that in there too. Okay, then I'm going to use this to just put in these little bits of detail right in here, and I don't have to paint it a whole lot. Just drop some of the color in, and because the yellow is still wet, this should move around quite a bit on its own. If it doesn't, we can help it along in a minute with with water on the wet paintbrush. But this is where I'm just kind of putting some color in to kind of bring out the shape of some of these petals. That's good. And then I want to rinse that out of there and then just kind of knock that down a little bit. Put some yellow lines in a couple of places, because this particular yellow is really high opacity, and I can paint over some stuff with it a little bit there. Okay, that flower is looking close to done. When it dries, I'll probably glaze a little bit of quinacridone gold just to warm it up a little bit overall, except I'll probably leave that petal and that one looking really bright yellow. And just kind of glaze a little bit of the quinacridone over the top of the rest of it, and that one will be perfect. I am right now going to put a little bit of yellow over top of this stem to brighten up the green of that stem right there. Don't think I really need it on that one, nor that one. So this is looking pretty good. I wouldn't say I'm ready to call it completely done, but we have been at it for over 2 hours, and that's about the maximum that I can go at one time and not need to just stop and take a break. But I think you've got the general idea, and I will finish it. This is gonna upload to my channel, and I will record myself finishing this and post it as well, so you can see the finished piece. I am going to take this brush and line over the lettering on my Happy Autumn. You can make these again and again and make all the sayings that you want to have. Whatever is your favorite fall saying, you can put that on there and change this up. You can paint it in different sizes. You can actually simplify it and paint it small and make really pretty greeting cards, or you can paint it this mine is pretty close to, well, I'll just tell you exactly what it is. Mine that I just painted today is 11 by 11 and a half, and this will look pretty in a frame on my wall once I have it finished. So there is today's painting, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get the whole thing in the frame, because like I said, when I paint larger like this, it doesn't fit all in my frame. Switch to that screen, see if that'll get it all. But anyway, I enjoyed painting today with everyone. Hope you had a good time. Hope you are happy with your finished paintings, and come back and see me again in 2 weeks. Let's see here. There we go. I want to always be able to say hi and bye, and give you a smile and say thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time. So happy fall. Bye for now.